It's a beautiful day in a lot of different ways.
Yeah, I would have to agree with you on that one.
I was riding my bike this morning and people were celebrating on the streets. It was nice to see.
Yeah, I saw a lot of people posting online that they found out the results from hearing cheering and fireworks. So
yeah, it's pretty cool.
Kind of good things to come.
It's good to see you both. Thanks very much for doing the interview. I've been wanting to line this up for a while. I know last time I saw you, Stephen, I think I was saying it would be good to get you guys around and come and play some music around here. We started doing a series of interviews where we would get people around and then record them live here in the room, in the spare room. And then obviously COVID took over the world and we haven't been able to do that at all, unfortunately.
Yeah, I was happy when I saw your name come through because I know we've been meaning to get together and talk about music. So I said, well, this is one way, I could have commented on myself, but why not? Why not another way?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's I've said this on a few different interviews. I mean, can you imagine like if this had all happened? I mean, it's bad as it is, right? But if it had happened 10 years ago when we didn't have this technology, 10 or 15 years ago, I mean, everyone would have been totally disconnected. There'd have been no way to connect whatsoever.
Yeah, it's wild.
Yeah.
I'm trying to find a bottle opener so I can with you. A very spicy food I'm eating here, so.
So I guess new album's coming out 13th of November. I wanted to talk a bit about how you found, because this is the first one for 5 years, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And that's a lot of downtime between albums, and I wanted to talk a bit about like the process of writing that, how it's come together, because in those 5 years, I mean, the world has changed a lot around you guys. There's been plenty of material to write about, I would say.
Yeah, it's come from that, and some older stuff we finally got around off the chopping, or chopped it off. We were, so in the last 5 years we were touring heavily for 3 of those. And collectively as a band decided that it was time to make a proper album. So we took time off. Stephen, being the main songwriter, already had a slew of songs written. Just kept on working on those, working on new stuff. And we spent the better part of 2 years getting over 50 songs in shape to try and get something together for this.
Over 50?
Yeah, it's a lot of songs. And, we had kind of like sent the songs around between some friends and industry folk and, kind of got a good idea of what was working. It was really hard to get, because we go in so many different directions, and especially when you're in the studio and you're not playing live, when you've been playing live and limited to just what you do as a 3-piece band, it's easy to start messing around and playing with a lot of different layers and stacking things. So we had like pretty ridiculously pretty demos. But we went mainly with most of the stuff. I mean, there's a little bit of heavier arrangements on the B side of the record, but the majority of the stuff we chose for this record is still very much could be played by 3-piece live, which is nice. But yeah, I mean, we needed to get a record together because, like you said, it'd been 5 years, and we really landscape is so much about how you make music and how you release music and how people connect to music. So that's a little jarring, when writing that many songs and then suddenly, the whole, I mean, it happened before that, but, definitely it's a singles market. So it's like, why put out a record? Some of our friends thought we were crazy. I'm thinking, well, we want to make a record. We're making a record. People that understand records they'll get it.
Yeah. I was reading an article and it's interesting that you mentioned that, like about making albums, because I've wondered a lot now, and I'm a bit of a vinyl addict anyway, but it's like one of the things I love about buying records is, like I've said this on a few interviews, it makes listening to music a bit of an event, because if you go and put an album on, then you kind of committing to listening to it from beginning to end. And honestly, I buy old stuff, I'll dig out old stuff, and there are songs I would never hear had I not started going back to vinyl again. And there was an interesting article in, I think it was in Rolling Stone this month, where they were saying, you know, has the concept of making an album and people listening to an album died? And they actually had some statistics from Spotify and some of the streaming sites, which was showing that actually people still did listen to the majority of albums that go up on a streaming site, which I thought was pretty encouraging. Because to me, it become a bit like a pick and mix, right?
Well, right. But I mean, so that's the thing, like Spotify and Apple Music and all those platforms, for me, they're a way to find new music.
Yeah.
So it does become very a la carte. When I love a record, I mean, there's a couple times I've gone on Spotify, and if I dig a couple songs of an artist, I'll buy the whole record, even if I'm 2 or 3 of them, because you know they're those B-side tracks. Those are the things you fall in love with after you spend some time with them, you know.
Yeah.
But you know, I wanted to comment on something you said about vinyl. You know, and Kevin's got a larger vinyl collection than me. But one thing I was thinking about the other day, because I've kind of been like carrying vinyl around like a little kid, bringing a record over to a friend's house.
Yeah.
You know, you develop a relationship with the vinyl, and you're like, you know, you want to take care of it, make it scratched, stuffed up. There's an actual like emotional bond with the copy of the record, making sure it stays in good shape. You know, that's a different part of it too, on top of the artwork and, you know, looking at the lyrics and credits and all that stuff. Yeah. That's why we made a vinyl, you know, we printed a vinyl for this record. You know, we got vinyl for what's a step over to you.
Yeah, and also to your point of how it's kind of the adventure of listening to a record, we spent what is it, Steve? It had to have been at least probably a month working on the sequencing, because we wanted to put out a record that we felt you could have the journey. Sorry about the dogs in the background. They're yelling at me. We wanted to have a journey from the beginning into the end of the record, and have an M side and an S side, and actually be able to experience what we thought we crafted as a group of songs that fit well together. Out of those 50 plus, we ended up tracking 13. We settled on 8 that we were going to put on the vinyl, but then we kept flipping ones in and out of B-sides. We feel they're all A-sides, but we didn't want to put out a 13-song record. And ultimately, it just ended with 9 songs that seemed to represent an LP to the best that we could from what we were looking for. We still have the 4 songs that we're undoubtedly going to do something with, but yeah, it was like circling back. It's that experience, and that's what we actually put time into. Didn't know if we were wasting the time, because I don't know how many people listen beginning to end, but off your article, I guess that's encouraging.
Yeah, I think it was pretty surprising to me, actually. I think it's interesting as well. I was talking to we interviewed Tyler Bryan for the website a couple of weeks ago, a couple of times actually. And he's doing a new album, and he mentioned the same that you guys have said, which was, I think he had something like 50 songs ready for this album. And I'm always interested to know, because he kind of said as well, he's like, sometimes that getting down to the 10 for the album is harder than writing the fucking songs in the first place. So what does that process look like for you? You mentioned, do you have some like trusted people that you bring into that process? Because you guys, I would guess, are pretty close to it throughout.
Well,
go ahead. That's a great question.
Well, I mean, we did involve a producer in this record. I mean, we actually shopped around to a couple producers. You know, we were looking at some, you know, some people up in Michigan and some people out west that, you know, made records we love, and we actually ended up going with a guy who mixed a couple records for us in Chicago by the name of Noel Molenberg. But before we got to that point, I mean, we did have kind of the E drive, you know, where we were uploading the demos. And I'd share it with other songwriters or other bands, start with like our industry friends, you know, and then, you know, if you're working on a song enough to annoy your girlfriend or your housemate, that's another time, you know, that, you know, if you catch them singing, you gotta, you know, you're probably just singing that song because you've heard me working on it so much. You know, you gotta go to people that haven't heard the song yet and see what they think. So that's a process. But honestly, I mean, I'll hand this over to Kev, because he has a big part to do with this as well. These songs come in so many different ways, and this particular time, you know, was not lyrics first. It was a lot of us crafting music first. So it was a process, honestly, of like, which ones were the closest, you know, of those 50 to having some really good feel in the lyric or vocal. You know, there's a lot of music left from that batch of songs that just didn't have a strong enough chorus or a strong enough identity yet lyrically, so they didn't even compete. So when you say like 50 songs, maybe 35 of them were really well polished and finished, and then the you know, the remaining 15 or 20 were like, you know, blah 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 kind of folk note, you know, with really great rhythm section and riff, you know, on top of it. And then after we went down, we dive in a little bit deeper and we start fine tuning. I don't know if you want to add anything to that, Kev. I kind of shared a lot.
Yeah, and we also kind of had a focus on this effort specifically of, I don't say this in like a way of quote unquote selling out, but just trying to make it a little bit more accessible from a pop format perspective, which like our last EP that we put out 5 years ago, Imitation Act, it's much more stranger side of the band, more the ambient kind of far out stuff that we liked experimenting with. The model side being more of the clean cut aspect of it. So we tried to blend the two, but veer on the side of the arrangements of the songs to be more in the model and accessible, but have some stranger elements. So there's some synths woven in there, and there's different, you know, tones and whatnot that kind of tie it all together and really create this lush landscape. But ultimately, yeah, the goal was just to put out something that we felt was our best work to date.
Yeah, the two songs you've released so far, "Breaks My Heart" and "Pick Me," I really like. I like the fact that they're two very different songs, and I think they highlight both of the things you've said there. So you guys do like layers and textures, and I think you can really hear that in "Breaks My Heart," whereas "Pick Me" is more, it comes in like a straight ahead rocker, right? And that's a great intro to that song. I love that.
Thanks. Yeah, that's exactly it. I mean, like the you know, there's something really charming about a band that, you know, like a band like ZZ Top or, you know, Nirvana, or these bands were true three pieces that can just keep it going. And I think you know, a big part of like what we did on this record was get a lot of guitar out of the way, to let the rhythm section pull some things a little bit more, and then, you know, use a guitar more as like a you know, reinforcer in a lot of things. But overall, I mean, you've seen us, you've seen me perform a bunch of the acoustic guitar. I mean, we have a lot of songs that are songs, like sit around a campfire sing a song. But you know, I mean, we're rock and rollers. You know, we want to get the high energy up. So there were a couple real slow songs we recorded that, you know, 6+ minutes, you know, real epic-y things that were like, you know, when we were thinking the record, like, oh, this is a little bit too dark on the B side.
Kind of like too.
How does it in terms of writing? I've sort of read some of your past interviews, and it sounds like principally you will be the writer, Stephen, and then you bring it in and you guys all work on it together. Has that remained the same for this album, or?
No, we were doing a lot of idea generating and a lot of, like, you know, collaboration on writing on this record more than any other. In fact, I kept myself out of the writing process as much as I could to leave it kind of you know, as collaborative, just so we could get to somewhere new. You know, it's like I would, you know, I joke around with like John, you know, John from A Friend Called Fire, or you know, talking to a fellow songwriter, I'd be like, well, they gave me my way, you know, for so long. It's not like, you know, we have nothing to lose by trying new things. And, you know, Evan is starting to develop a lot as a writer, and Vince brings a lot of really cool things to the stage as well, musically, lyrically. You know, there's still a little bit more of that's coming from me, but I think we're like trending in a direction where it's going to be, you know, as everyone develops more into their own writers, that it will be a little bit more hopefully shared ground. And not that I don't mind being the primary songwriter, but it is cool for me I have a huge passion for producing. So when Kevin brings into something cool, or Vince does, you know, I love being the sounding board for once, because, you know, it does feel like you can empty your tank a little bit after 10 years outputting songs into, you know, I bring 20 songs, they may be like 3 or 4 of them. You know, it's like, that's probably one for your, you know, for a day later when you maybe do something. But no, but I honestly, probably the most collaborative project we've ever worked on together.
Yeah. How does it typically, because I'm always interested in terms of like songwriting process, how does it come through to you normally? If you're writing, is it normally, I think you've already said actually, this one maybe was more music first rather than lyrics. Is that normal, or is that a change from what it's been in the past?
For me, that actually goes back to my youth. Before I was a singer, that's all I wrote. and how I wrote. And then for, probably for 8-9 years in there, I only wrote lyrics first. In fact, that the irony is that 4 of the songs that didn't make, well, 3 of the 4 songs that didn't make the record, 3 of those were all lyrics first record songs that I love. I was a big fan of those songs. But because they were lyrics first songs, they don't hit from the same place as these, like, energetic rock songs we write and then pepper in the lyrics. So I don't know, Kevin, how do you write? Do you do music first or lyrics first?
I typically do music first. Being that my original instrument is actually the drums, and then I started playing the bass. I wanted to play the bass, but my brother had a drum set, and I kind of just sat on that more than I did on my bass. I typically tend to write rhythm sections first before anything. Then I try and put a melody over the rhythm section. I'm definitely not a seasoned guitar player. That is the last thing. I typically leave that out, and if I do anything, it's something with melody or color to try and give an idea. I stand aside and just let Steve do whatever with that one. Like one of the songs on the record that I had written, that I brought to the band, the majority of the guitar work, not majority, all of the guitar work is Steven. There's great hooks in it. There's a lot of good stuff in there that wouldn't have come from me.
Yeah. And I guess you guys are, I mean, you're saying you came off the road a little bit over the last 3 years. You were, I mean, really road dogs. You guys were touring a lot. So were you writing, during that period, were you writing on the road? And like, has that been different as well? Because I sometimes wonder like what comes through in songs, and it might be different if you're writing something, in the back of a van as you're traveling between venues, as opposed to, in your home for a longer period of time. Do you think that's impacted the way you've written?
Yeah, I mean, definitely. We're like kind of like partially, we get together during the week, when we would do longer tours, and we would do like these 4-day or 10-day tours, and times in between we get together and like work something up and then bring it on the road for the next 10 days and flush it out live, and then you tell probably much, by the 3rd or 4th show, let's get that out of the set. It's not there yet, or it's not vibing. Versus when you're, the way we did this, a lot of this records, we would go on a Saturday, 8-9 o'clock in the morning and just start playing music. And then by 3 o'clock, be recording something, demoing something. And then, it just happens from such a different, calmer place. It's not like as from a survival place. We're in the road, get the music out, bring something new to the set. It definitely changes where you're from.
Yeah. It's an interesting one. I interviewed a guy, a Nashville songwriter called Matthew Perryman Jones, and his last album, he did this thing that I thought was really interesting. He did it as a Kickstarter, and the idea was that the money that he raised, he was going to travel to these different places and write while on his own, while he was on the road in these different places, not touring, just going to different places. So he went to like this abandoned hospital in Texas or something, and then out into the middle of the desert. And I interviewed him about it, and I was like, well, how did it go? And he's like, I didn't write a single thing while I was on those journeys. And then he said he kind of came back to his house, and he'd actually moved back into the old place he used to live in, and it all just poured out of him as soon as he got back. And he says, looking at it now, looking at the finished album, he can see how the different places impacted what he'd written, but while he was actually there, didn't write a thing. Yeah. Because like for me, I felt like, man, that's pretty cool. Like if you go there and you're trying to like soak in the surroundings, and it just didn't seem well. Maybe it did work for him, but it was just a delayed response.
I thought the Sufjan Stevens approach, where he was going to try and write a record for every state, was a cool concept, because you can kind of put yourself in that headspace depending on whatever it is, the landscape, the political, the friends, the culture. But that turned out to be a bit too tough of an effort.
I mean, let's be. I mean, I don't know. Maybe you do want to go write a record about Wyoming. I don't know. Maybe. We've toured through Wyoming. We played Wyoming. We played Laramie, Wyoming, a couple times. We spent a lot of time on the road, and I'll tell you though. I mean, it's like that really that's a really sobering thing to do, after a while. In the beginning it's fun, of course you're young, you got a lot of energy, you're out there, you're meeting people, making a lot of friends, building communities, but the best part about it is like, when you're not playing, when you get together your hometown, how good are we're not in front of our hometown fans, how many people are going to come up and buy a record? And when you start turning people over in other cities and, having them come back to shows, that's really encouraging. It's a lot of fuel.
Yeah.
But, we have seen, I know a lot of bands that are independent, kind of at our level, struggle with the same thing. We have seen a big downturn in the independent touring, market. A lot more cover bands going on, a lot less original music, and a lot more people doing they'll have like a DJ instead of band and things like that. So it was definitely a time also to be like, man, we're really putting a lot of energy into touring, and it's like, what are we really getting back right now when you could reach so many more people from? I mean, right now people are making thousands of fans just from their bedrooms now, because they're streaming. It's been interesting to watch that get off the road and recalibrate and be like, yeah, maybe we didn't have to drive, a couple thousand miles every month to make new fans, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's interesting that whole technology discussion. And I guess the thing, this year's highlighted to me is just, and obviously we're a bit different. I mean, we run the website, Kirst's photographing all the time. So we're at live music, seeing live music all the time. And it's been like withdrawal for me this year. And I guess for a lot of bands as well. I mean, just not having that live experience, not being able to go into a room with a load of your friends or a load of strangers even, who end up being your friends at the end of the night, and just watch a band and, sweat and enjoy the experience. It's tough. It's tough to lose that.
Yeah, I think that's been part of one of the most difficult parts of this for me personally, is because between us playing live shows and then going to see live shows, whether it be local bands touring nationally, bands, international bands, I arguably spend a third to half of the year of my time at shows. No joke. And now I just sit at home, and I've done a few live streams watching. They don't hit they just don't hit the same. You're not sitting next to someone yelling at them in the middle of a song, or you're not sweating in a room and, packed together. And I miss all that. We're doing our first live stream next week. We haven't been anti-live stream. It's just, how do you make it an experience that's still relatable, as opposed to just a live stream that arguably could not be live. People wouldn't even know the difference.
I think it's interesting the way I've seen different people approach it. You've got people doing a very sort of lo-fi approach, and then I've seen different bands effectively, play a live show in a venue and just record it, like, properly mic'd up, as they would be live. And I think there's a place for both of them. There are people who do those streams, and you can communicate with them during the time they're doing it. People are sending them messages. I guess it's just, realistically, it's the only way to connect live at the moment.
It's a trip though, because I don't know if do you remember the band Priest McGee?
Yeah.
They used to do like a live thing where, when they were playing live music, where they'd have people from the fans communicating with them through text, pre-pandemic, many years ago. But the thing that's kind of like, going back to that, like, bucket the fuel, when you're making fans, and I mean, going to see a band and being inspired, or being like, oh, I got to stay on my game, like I could really sing or whatever. The way you get inspired by each other's musicians, that stuff, it doesn't hit the same when you're watching someone. And there's a level of frustration that I have watching a lot of people that are so talented, almost be put down in the state of like almost begging, for like, demos here, and it's like, they're so brave. And I talk about this to so many musicians, about the people that keep getting up and doing it. And thankfully, a lot of people have been able to sustain some level of revenue, but they're losing way more for not being able to sell, and go into venues, and sell merchandise and that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Did you guys think about, the other interesting thing, I think, during this pandemic, in terms of new music, and I've spoken to a couple of people who had different perspectives. Well, I've spoken to one, and then I was listening to Joe Pug's podcast. He does a songwriters podcast, and he was talking to BJ Barnum from American Aquarium, about their new album, and basically BJ was saying like those guys looked at what was going on during lockdown and actually picked a week when nothing else was being released, and it actually benefited them releasing during lockdown, and the album did pretty well. And then I've spoken to other people who I've interviewed who I actually spoke to Suzanne Santo, you know, Neil Turk, his cousin, and she's written a new album, and she was like, I just don't know. I don't know if now's the time to release it. This was earlier in the lockdown, because she was saying personally herself, at the time she was comfortable going back to music that she knew and she already knew and she was comfortable listening to, and she was like, I don't feel like I was ready for new music, so I don't know whether to release this album now or wait until later. Did you guys think about it in terms of the lockdown and timing? And
yeah, we did, and you know, there's a lot going on, right? The civil unrest stuff, the you know, all the attention on the political landscape in America. There's a lot to compete with, and then, you know, let's be honest. I mean, like, a lot of people are dealing with a lot right now, you know, whether it be health, you know, losing jobs. There's a lot of serious stuff going on, and there's a little bit of like, you know, am I really that important? Are we that important right now to ask for attention? There's so many things that are more important than us going on in the world. We've talked about that, you know, but for us, you know, I think we intentionally waited till after this week, election,
yeah.
release and do it kind of through a different way, and you know, kind of a more waterfall way than dropping it. You know, we did some soft release stuff, and I know like a couple bands have done that where they'll release something for a month, then they'll take it down, and then do it later just to like get people generated. It's just hard to cut through all the noise right now, man. There's just going on, and rightfully so. It's a serious time. I don't need to, you know, I don't need another like or another you know, follow. But if someone likes Model Stranger and, you know, has been waiting for new music, they're like, you better come over and check out the new record, because we've been waiting for it, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's a need. This is the other thing, the lockdown and everything. I think it's like, I mean, for me, I can speak from my experience. There's a need for music. There's more of a need for the arts. It just highlights how important it actually is. I mean, I was thinking, like, Pick Me. You could have tried to get that as a campaign song.
What?
Like a campaign song, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it couldn't be more relevant now.
I was one thing I did want to talk to you guys about, because, and I've read a lot about your sort of perspective on recording, and, you know, I think there's a couple of things. You've spoken about you being like an analog band in a digital age and things like that, and those quotes, but what did the recording process look like for this one? In the past, you've talked about, you know, recording to tape and recording live in the room. This one, I mean, it sounds like there's some layers on these tracks. When you put down the track initially, was it still live?
Kevin,
yeah, so we did everything live. The focus on this was to get at least solid drum takes as the foundation, but everything was played live. We played as a three-piece. Steve sang guitar, I played bass. We did go back and redo some of the bass. Guitars were you know, whatever needed to be redone was redone over it. And then obviously we're three people, so percussion, synth, anything else we added on, that had to be, you know, an after layer. But the initial core tracks were done live.
Yeah. What was the process like? Was it a long recording process this time?
It was. There was a lot of personal things that happened in the middle of the recording process, that, you know, with you know, just a lot of life transition stuff. So we kind of had to stop and start a couple times in different ways. But, you know, because we were going digital, you know, I mean, this is like with tape too. You know, if you're not getting the take right, you just got to keep doing until you get it right. I challenged myself a lot, you know, to do that and get a lot of things right. So I wouldn't say I would say we were close to beating it to death, but we were just at at a point where it was like, well, we've put so much time in, let's make sure we get it right now, because if we're not recording, you know, the first record we did, first full length we did in like 9 days. And it's okay now for, you know, if we're actually gonna do this over 3-4 months, 5 months. Oh, we're at month 6. Like, why don't we wait 2 weeks and see what the you know, how we feel about that? No, let's go redo that guitar after all, or like whatever. we did a lot of that, but the um the difference with like pre-digital and even like when people before they're in studios a lot is everyone was so live intensive. People were playing music 12 hours a day, and you would get a good perspective of the song. I think right now with the capability to record so quick and easy is that it actually, the one thing that changed a lot is having perspective on the song. When you have a song sitting there for 6 months that's pretty much done and you're like, I'm not really convinced on that vocal, like I want to redo it, versus like, you're excited and it's like fresh, you're like, yeah, like let's record it. And then you're like, well, let me hear with a fresh ear. So that was a benefit, of a byproduct of all these things that weren't kind of pleasant that happened to us along the way, of taking so long, is that we did learn to have a little bit more patience with making records. What a great respect to have. You should have anyway, but we were kind of forced to learn it that way.
It must be so easy to obsess these days. It must be so easy to sort of nitpick over the tiny, any tiny imperfection or anything like that. And I think I've spoken to a few people. I like the different perspectives on it. There was a thing what is that documentary? I was talking about this the other day. I think it was like, it was the Foo Fighters documentary, where they did that album and they recorded to tape. He wanted to record in his garage live to tape. And then they had different people on talking about like the different perspectives, and it was like you had the two polar opposites. You had them saying we're going to do it to tape this time, and then you had Trent Reznor on there basically talking about how he uses Pro Tools as like an instrument. It's not just a recording software, but he uses all of its functionality as like an instrument. And I think there's somewhere in the middle these days that's probably about right between those two things.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's definitely a hybrid thing. If you go into the newest version of Pro Tools, they have a lot of things to emulate tapes now. You can slow down, create, it's very interesting how, so it's a hybrid thing is good. I think it was, we definitely learned a lot working with this producer on how to use Pro Tools in a different way, and kind of flipped my mindset on it a little bit. I was never anti Pro Tools by any means. It's just, for me, there's a romance to like, all the gear and, all the physical nature of going through all those different mediums, and hearing the first time you hear like 2-inch tape reduced down to like 1/4-inch tape in real time. There's nothing like it sonically, that when you have that experience, like, wow, that's really special. In Pro Tools is like, just throw on a plug-in, like people just like, it's like, it kind of polishes it, but there's nothing as magical as tape, never.
No, and also what you mentioned as far as like the nitpicky piece, I don't think something is ever done. I think you just have to draw a line in the sand and just like, that's it, we're done. We have to move on, because I forgot the quote, but it was one of the guys from the Eagles mentioned that, and it was like, you have to walk away. If you don't ever walk away, it's never going to be finished. I mean, there's bands that put out records and you go see them live and the song is different than it is on the record. Because they're still working on it.
I think that's the thing, and I think it's like, even in terms of the recording process, right? I mean, I was talking it was a producer interview the other week, Mark Aselli, and he was talking about how his preference is to record live, but he has people in isolation booths and things, but he likes the energy you get from recording live, and he likes the fact that it probably adds something a little bit different to, just tracking. And I like listening to older records. Like, I mean, in the example I gave in that was like Led Zeppelin, right? When you listen to Zeppelin records, there are imperfections all over that stuff. Like, they just used to go in and play. And actually, it's part of the music. It's part of what's there. People make mistakes. There are little imperfections, and that's kind of nice to hear sometimes.
It is, and it's a weird time. And I'm not saying, I mean, a lot of bands get away with it still, but I mean, there's definitely there has been a push from the industry to kind of clean everything up and kind of attack that stuff. But even the way that records are mixed and the way that things are recorded now, mistakes they're not as pleasing to the ear. Clear and loud. You go back to those Beatles records and those Zeppelin records you're talking about, everything's so compressed and stacked on top of each other. Like, you kind of have to, like, in a way, it blends in a different way. And not saying that, I mean, there's a lot of, I mean, I'm a big fan of the Black Crowes. There's a lot of real stuff like that on Black Crowes records. Like, oh, that's a nasty wrong note, and I love that. John and I, we always talk about and I just say it because, you know, John, you know, we always talk about Neil Young, you know, and his guitar playing, and, you know, John's on the opposite spectrum of me with this stuff. I have a really great, you know, respect for the ethics to like get a guitar take right. John's like, no, I just go in, you know, 3 takes and whatever it is, it is. And I respect that. There's an element to that, but there's also like this point of like, you know, we're not on a budget from a label, push us out the door, and this is our gear. And it's like, you know, if you look back in 20 years, like, yeah, I gave it 3 takes, you know, like there's a part of me that wouldn't reconcile with that unless which, you know, the band, we've been talking about this. Our goal is to be a little bit quicker and dirtier this time around, you know. You got to keep like changing it up, because if you do things the same way, you're going to get predictable and to yourself too, right?
I appreciate the imperfections of live stuff, because it also gives you these little things to find. Like when I listen to Beatles records, I hear stuff that tambourines are doing that are clearly mistakes that are just left in there. There's a track on Black Crowes' album Lions that you actually hear someone's cell phone. It's the old Nokia ring. You hear it every single time that I listen to the record. I hear it and I was like, there's a cell phone. I love that shit. Like it's really cool to hear. But yeah, kind of what Steven mentioned is the industry has gone so polished and clean that it's hard to even get away with that and try and, you know, be successful in an independent level, because it's hard to break through if you're not competing with what's out there.
I do like those little bits and pieces. I can't remember which Petty record it is. There's one of the Heartbreakers records where he recorded it at his home studio, and you hear his wife in the background going, "It's just normal house noises." Like, and they left it in. They left it on the recording. So
There's a song called Black Country Woman on Physical Graffiti where in the beginning Robert Plant says, "Nah, leave it," and and then you hear it again. And it's a plane flying over, because they were filming in the garden, and you know, plane. Which back then, I don't know how often planes flew, but it was probably more of an anomaly to catch a plane on recording. You know, you're in some shire, you know. And the plane.
You can take it when you're live, and you guys are a live band as well. I mean, that's the thing. Then you can take it somewhere else. It's funny you mentioned about. I actually had a conversation with John, and John is from a friend called Fire. For like, if people are watching this, they don't know who he is, John Allegretto. And I was talking to him about we were at Farm Aid last year, and it's the first time I ever saw Neil Young live. And I love watching Neil Young on a stage play like a guitar, because there's nothing right about it, right? It's like when he plays a solo, you're like, holy shit, is that good, or is it like? But the one thing you can't accuse him of is that he doesn't put like everything into it. And I think if you see someone doing that, regardless of what it sounds like, sometimes you can't help but get on board. And like
and I think that like, well, that's like exactly, that's such a part of like, I mean, Kevin just made a comment about how it's like, you know, industry, like, you know, like we were very intentional that we wanted to write some stuff more accessible to try to break into some new markets and get some new people, you know, to hear us. But at the end of the day, like, you as an artist, I mean, you're always trying new things and find out who you are, you know. It's like when, you know, first time you wore skinny jeans, you're like, God, do these actually work for me, you know? And maybe 2 years later, like, they never worked, right? The imperfections, I think someone like Neil Young, you know, at this point, like he knows who he is, you know, and then he gets up there and he knows exactly how to get the best out of who he is by the way he approaches things. And a lot of like, you know, a lot of artists like Neil Young that have been doing it for so long with so many different people, that really kind of solidify it. Like, it molds you even harder and harder into like that land of freedom. Like you know, you have molded freedom. Like, I could do whatever I want because I'm Neil Young, you know? You mentioned like Trent Reznor, Dave Grohl, allows people that just have that, you know, big dick energy where they're just like, I'm going to take this, I'm going to own this note.
You
know?
That's it. Yeah, that's me. And I was going to say as well, I mean, you talk about sort of changing. I mean, Breaks My Heart is a great song in that respect, because there's a bit of everything in there. And I was going to say as well, I mean, the things that jumped out at me from both those tracks was, one, the production value, because they sound great, but your voice as well, Stephen. Breaks My Heart, there are some of the parts of the chorus there, your voice very much reminds me of Matt Bellamy from Muse. It's like hitting those notes, it's really impressive. Like I really enjoyed that.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
That was fun. That was a fun song to record. It was the last song I recorded vocally. I made sure to leave it till the end.
Yeah.
I wanted to make sure that I had all the strength I needed before I approached that song.
Yeah, you mentioned you were, I think I read in another interview that you did some classical, like opera kind of singing training in your past, or that was
Yeah.
part of what you did. So that obviously probably came in handy there.
Well, no, actually, I've had a weird journey with the voice because I was, I was just not a natural singer. I was a god awful singer. We could not find a singer for the life of us. I just wanted to be like a Jimmy Page, kind of like guitar player, and get half drunk and play blues guitar or whatever. And I started singing, and it was a long journey to be able to sing. And I was singing, classical, and then it kind of started destroying my voice. And there was we do these Halloween shows every year, and I had one year where we did a Chili Peppers set, and that kind of like something happened, and my voice kind of tipped into a place that it was really just like it wasn't a good place. So I've actually stopped training classical, and I've trained with a different vocal coach now.
Yeah.
And I've kind of building my voice. That range of the voice that you reference it's a tough place to be, but for some reason that part is not left me. There's some other stuff going on, but it was an interesting record to make, because when you're rebuilding your voice and trying to record a record at the same time, it can be very frustrating. It requires a lot of patience,
Yeah.
things turn out, but no more classical for me. I'm done with life.
So I guess we're running over 40 minutes. So I guess what I want to do is just stress that the album is out on the 13th of November, right? You guys, did you mention that you're going to do a live stream? Is that going to be coordinated with the release?
Yeah, we have two actually. We're doing one through Gigmore, which is going to be on Twitch on the 12th, and then we're going to be doing a different set, a little bit longer, on the 13th. That's Saturday, on Facebook Live.
Okay, cool. And we'll link, we'll make sure that we link those at the bottom of the interview, and we'll be looking out for that. And then 13th for the release date. So I mean, good luck. I've pre-ordered the vinyl, so I'm looking forward to that arriving. So good luck with the release. I hope it goes really well. And then maybe once we're out of this lockdown, maybe you guys can come around, do another interview, and maybe record a couple in the room.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully it's sooner than later.
Yeah, let's hope so.
Yeah.
Well, thanks, guys. Thanks for taking the time. We'll look back and remember doing this interview on a pretty monumental day, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks. Take a minute just to to comment on the fact we have our first female woman, and a woman color, minority in the White House. It's a pretty significant day. That's what we should focus on right now. It's a really big turning point in America. So happy to be here with you, and thanks for having us, man.
Yeah, thanks, guys. Have a great day.
Talk to you too.
Bye.
Bye-bye.